Hello? Hello, are you busy? Oh, okay. Anata, look, kaya po di, ada iti Bible study ngayon kasi teacher ko 93 years old.
Oh, there's Daryl. Rogers, so you have Ruth and Daryl
Well,
on
that's
board.
good. Daryl's on because I think it's his turn tonight.
Okay.
Yes, it is mine. Shabbat shalom, everyone, and Chag Sameach.
Shabbat shalom.
Okay, Daryl, glad to have you here. We'll start with chapter 7 by and by. Okay, I think we need to go ahead. Time is moving on. So, all right, let me take care of that one there. Okay. Abba, thank you for this time tonight to fellowship with you and with all our beloved brethren around the world, centered on Yeshua, our Lord and Savior. So, Father, I pray for wisdom tonight as you, by your Holy Spirit, open my mind and teach through me and open the mind of every student to understand what you have written here for our benefit and growth in our spiritual life. Thank you for everyone that's online now and those that will be signing in very soon. Thank you in Yeshua. Amen. All right, concerning Israel. Today is the 15th of Tishri, the first day of Sukkot. Now, the greeting anytime is Shana Tova, which is Happy New Year. But the greeting today is more specific. Hag Sameach Sukkot. Okay, Hag in Hebrew means a pilgrim festival. So in the old times, Tanakh times, every male living in the land of Israel was required to come to Jerusalem for the three pilgrim festivals. First one, Passover, unleavened bread for a week, Shavuot or Pentecost for a day, and Sukkot for another week. And God promised that when you come, he will protect the state of Israel, so no invasion will happen if they obey and come to Jerusalem. They can leave their place in the hands of their family, or if the family wants to come with nobody else. Okay, now Sameach is joy. Hag Sameach, it's the joy of it, and Sukkot. Now Sukkah is singular, Sukkot is plural. And I think if it ends in ot, it might be female, if I'm not mistaken. If it ends in im, then it's probably masculine. So anyway, Sukkah, Sukkot. Hag Sameach Sukkot. Happy Pilgrim Festival of Sukkot. Now, this time in Israel is very joyful. And the ICEJ, International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem, sponsors a big Feast of Tabernacles, as it's called, for Sukkot during this time. And they will have hotels booked up, and it costs a bit, but you register months ahead, pay your fee, and they bring you around to various activities. Now, the activity today to launch the week was a concert on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Very nice. Now, next week sometime, I don't know which day, but there will be a march of Jerusalem. I think it's done by the municipality of Jerusalem, but the ICJ is involved with it. And there'll be a big delegation from the Philippines, as usual, and this is all church people. And they will be dressed in their native garb, whether mountain or lowland or Mindanao. And the lead people will have a banner representing the Philippines and other delegations. I read that the Pacific island of Fiji is also bringing a big delegation this year. Now, many of the Pacific islands have been evangelized in our Christian and Stand with Israel, quite a group of them. So we appreciate that. So this big march will be next week. but there's a lot of activities that go on. We have never been involved in the Jerusalem activities when we were there, but we had friends and we were doing other things as well. So it's a great joyous time, but they still have to be careful of the enemy, the Palestinian, the Arabs, and some will be carrying their weapons for sure, as they were told for carry your weapons on Yom Kippur, so on. All right, that's what's going on in Israel today. Otherwise, politically, it's pretty much the same. And we're going to move on now to, did I forget something I was going to say? I forgot. All right, I'm ready to go ahead with 1 Corinthians now, chapter 7. And Daryl, it'll be our reader tonight from the New American Standard Version, 1995 edition, if I'm quoting you correctly, Daryl. All right. Now, starting out then, we'll be doing 7, 8, maybe even 9. I don't know. We'll see how much territory we cover, because there are things to explain here. And of course, that's my job and my privilege of doing so. So read chapter 7, verse 1 through 7 to start with, Daryl. Thank you.
1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1 to 7. And yes, Lolo did quote the version I use correctly. Verse 1. Now, concerning the things about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to touch a woman, but because of immoralities, each man is to have his own wife, and each woman is to have her own husband. The husband must fulfill his duty to his wife, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise also the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Stop depriving one another except by agreement for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer and come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. But this I say by way of concession, not of command. Yet I wish that all men were even as I myself am. However, each man has his own gift from God, one in this manner and another in that.
Okay. Now, we know that males are programmed by God one way. Females are programmed by God in a different way. But both male and female have sex drives built in there. Otherwise, population would die out. So God told Adam and Hava and other people along the way, be fruitful and multiply. So God wants people to be married and to produce children. That's his plan. But anyway, there are problems in marriage and they have to be worked out. Now, this is one thing that kind of bothers me about many Filipinos going overseas to work and leaving their family behind. I know it's an economic necessity for many people, but there are problems involved with it, as we have here. And advice is given, don't separate from your spouse, except for a short time if you want to concentrate on prayer or Bible study or something, but then come back together again, because the temptation to wander off to somebody else is quite powerful and quite real. Now, Paul is saying here, I wish everybody was like me, but not everybody has that gift. So, Daryl, I want you to go to Matthew chapter 19 and read verse 12 for us to analyze some exceptions. Matthew 19:12.
Matthew 19:12. For there are eunuchs who were born that way from their mother's womb, and there are eunuchs who were made eunuchs by men, and there are also eunuchs who made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. He who is able to accept this, let him accept it.
Okay, your voice is a little bit low. Maybe turn up a little bit. That's all right. Now, we have three kinds of eunuchs in this. A eunuch, of course, is one who stays single, is not married, so on. And there are many eunuchs in the Bible. Sad to say that when you're taken into government service, way back in Tanakh times, sometimes they are castrated to be civil servants so that they are more docile and do their work and there's no rebellion, so on. Now my screen went blank there. I hope everything is going fine.
It's very good. It's okay,
Okay.
Roger. Yeah.
Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, from what I understand, were also castrated to be servants of Nebuchadnezzar. And that's quite sad, but anyway, that's the way the custom was. And in the book of Acts, we have the Ethiopian eunuch, who is the treasurer for the queen. And apparently he was castrated to be a civil servant there. Okay, so Yeshua is saying here, there's some that are born that way. Now, in my analysis, I don't think very many are born with no sexual desire. And whether they are impotent with defective male glands, possibly something like that, but not too many that I would guess. But then I don't have medical records to back it up. And then the ones we're talking about that have been castrated to serve in government positions way back in Tanakh times and even apostolic times. And then there's a third category of some men who have decided to discipline themselves not to marry, not to have any kind of sexual thing, in order to give themselves totally to serve the Lord, just like the Apostle Paul. Now, some believe that Paul was married because of his status in the Jewish religion, but Paul never indicates that as far as I know. But he's always indicating that he is single and fully dedicated to serving God as he has been called to do, and encourages other people to do so. So I guess single guys that are up in years apparently are either self-made eunuchs, or maybe they just never found anybody that they were interested in, or nobody was interested in them. I don't know. But whenever Paul comes up with that, just remember, these are people who have a strong will to suppress that strong sexual attraction or activity. And that's why he says in verse 1, or in this section here, let every man have his own wife, and every wife have her own husband, because that sexual desire is very, very strong unless there's some reason to suppress it. And I think it's God's will that most everybody should be married and produce children. Now, some get married very late in life, so there are no children possible because women come to a point of menopause, and their ovaries, they cease to produce eggs, so that any sperm coming in there has no place to go. Okay, so we'll leave it there for that and go on now from verses 8 to 11.
First Corinthians chapter 7, verse 8 to 11. But I say to the unmarried and to widows that it is good for them if they remain even as I. But if they do not have self-control, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. But to the married I give instructions, not I, but the Lord, that the wife should not leave her husband. But if she does leave, she must remain unmarried, or else be reconciled to her husband, and that the husband should not divorce his wife.
Right now, this is a statement that you cannot take out of context. There are reasons for separation. There are reasons for divorce. And this came up at the last conference we were at in 2016. And Ted Franco was a widower. His wife had already died. And the lady he is with was Maria. And he treated her, they're not married yet at that time. When they had the Friday night blessings, he treated her as if she were to be his wife. And other people heard him, and they were saying, gossiping around that she cannot marry because she's divorced or something of the sort. I don't know, but they were saying that she was not qualified to be married. So Ted called me that night about 9 o'clock at the hotel and told me about it. I said, okay, I'll take care of it the next day. So I told them, I said, now I hear this is going on around that Maria's not qualified to marry Ted. But she is, and she has two reasons for it. One is her husband was a bum and just deserted her. And we're going to get into that category in this chapter pretty soon. if the unbeliever leaves, the wife is free to remarry. Okay. The second reason was he not only left her, but he got shacked up with another woman and has another family. So he's committed adultery. So Maria had two reasons to qualify for remarriage. One, desertion, and one, adultery on the part of this guy she had married. So don't take this verse out of context and make a doctrine out of it. Because some people, like the Catholic Church and some others, if you leave, you cannot remarry. And that was the thought of these people that were talking against Marie. They were, in the Catholic Church, you have to get a annulment or whatever. Once you divorce, you cannot remarry. Well, you can. So we're not following Roman Catholic doctrine or any Protestant church that might have the same idea. No. If you are divorced in certain categories, you can remarry. Okay. You don't leave, though, unless you have a good reason for it. What was the other thing I was going to say? Let's see. If they don't have again, Paul is saying, yeah, I wish the single and the widows would stay like me, but if they don't have self-control, let them marry, as it's better to marry than to burn with passion. And that's very true, because the sex drive is the second strongest after self-preservation to keep yourself alive. So it's very powerful, but it can be controlled. So I am told. But for me, I wanted to be married. I wanted a companion. I knew I need somebody to do her part of the responsibilities of marriage, and I do my part. And we have that kind of teamwork. And of course, we've been married 67 years now, but Naomi has been an invalid for quite a few years. So it's not a happy marriage at the present time, but that's the way things go sometimes. All right, now let's go ahead with verse 12 up to verse 16. A few other items here to comment on.
First Corinthians chapter 7, verse 12 to 16. But to the rest I say, not the Lord, that if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever, and she consents to live with him, he must not divorce her. And a woman who has an unbelieving husband, and he consents to live with her, she must not send her husband away. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified through her husband. For otherwise your children are unclean, but now they are holy. Yet if the unbelieving one leaves, let him live. The brother or the sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God has called us to peace. For how do you know, O wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, O husband, whether you will save your wife?
Okay, now here's the category of desertion. If a person is not a believer, and hopefully this happens after marriage and one spouse becomes a believer. Hopefully the believer did not marry an unbeliever knowingly, but some people have married an unbeliever without realizing it, and that's a Sayang situation. But anyway, here's desertion. If the unbeliever and the spouse becomes a believer, and the unbeliever cannot stand the change in that spouse, why sometimes they want to leave. Now, if the couple were both worldly people, going to dances, getting drunk, and all this kind of stuff, and then one of them becomes a believer and changes lifestyle, and then the other partner is disappointed now. He or she does not have their drinking partner and their whatever else they're going to do, party going. So sometimes they cannot tolerate the difference in their spouse and they will leave. Okay, and God says if they want to leave, let them leave. Sit it down, get out of here. Because you're not under bondage in such cases, God says. You're not bound to that guy or that woman if the person is not a believer and is not tolerant of your believing lifestyle. Okay, now keep these things in mind because maybe situations will come up in your community or your friends, and you have to be able to speak biblically, even though the laws of your land may be a bit different. For instance, in the Philippines, you cannot get divorced because of the Catholic Church. So you have to go through that very expensive, what do you call it? Anyway, okay. So on, legal manipulation, so on.
Annulment, Roger.
All right, now, desertion is a reason for leaving a spouse. All right, Daryl, now go from 17 to 19. We get another category here.
Verse 17 to 19. Only as the Lord has assigned to each one, as God has called each other, in this manner let him walk. And so I direct in all the congregations. Was any man called when he was already uncircumcised? He is not to become uncircumcised. Has anyone been called in uncircumcision? He is not to be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing. But what matters is the keeping of the commandments of God.
Okay. Okay, read verse 20 there too. That should be there.
Each man must remain in that condition in which he was called.
All right, now notice the word called. Salvation is when you have been called by God. The human being does not decide he wants to be saved and take steps to find God and to do so. Now, he might do that after become a believer and disobedient, but not originally. No, you have to be called by God, and that's part of salvation. Don't forget, if you have been called by God to be saved, wonderful. But then there's a second calling as to what he wants you to do. So when I was in the U.S. Army, the Lord called me to leave college teaching and go to the Philippines. And thankfully, I obeyed and went. So that's a calling. Now, this idea that he puts out here is not to be taken without context. Circumcision to a Jewish person is very, very significant. It's not nothing, as he says here. Circumcision or uncircumcision is nothing except in the Jewish sense, where they are under a covenant with God based on Abraham, that every male will be circumcised on the 8th day after birth. And that's another category that Paul is not dealing with here. And of course, you cannot explain everything every time you come up with a subject. But it's my job as a teacher to bring the context to light so that you understand that this is talking about maybe Gentiles, circumcision or uncircumcision is not that important, but keeping the commandments of God is, except in this Jewish category of Brit Milah, the circumcision under the covenant. All right, very important in Jewish life. Now, I go ahead with 20 to 24, verse 20 to 24.
We just did 20, so I will start from 21.
Yeah, 21.
Verse 21. Were you called while a slave? Do not worry about it. But if you are able also to become free, rather do that. For he who was called in the Lord while a slave is the Lord's freedman. Likewise, he who was called while free is Messiah's slave. You were bought with a price. Do not become slaves of men. Brethren, each one is to remain with God in that condition in which he was called.
Now, we have to many times put our minds back into the first century in their culture to understand some of these things that are written here. And that's the context. And it will come up more important in some more verses as we go ahead in this chapter. But slavery was an economic situation in those days. I guess you could hire people, but normally you would buy a slave to do the work you wanted done. And many slaves became believers because being a slave is pretty demoralizing, but being a child of God was really wonderful. So in Acts, sometimes we have that situation coming to the fore where believers are meeting in the evening after Shabbat and having fellowship there. And slaves, possibly some of them anyway, could get away during the evening time when they could not necessarily get away during the daytime to attend Shabbat meetings. So anyway, keep in mind, slavery was an economic institution back in those days. And for the most part, at least as far as Jewish people are concerned, it was very, very mild. In fact, the slave was treated like a member of the family, not necessarily for the pagans, Gentiles outside. All right. But when you read about slavery with beatings and whippings and all of that, I don't think that was necessarily the case way back there. But to stay in the situation you were when you were saved. Okay. I guess that's obvious. So we'll just go ahead then. Verses 25 through 28, Daryl.
Verse 25 to 28. Now, concerning virgins, I have no command of the Lord, but I give an opinion as one who by the mercy of the Lord is trustworthy. I think then that it is good in view of the present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be released. Are you released from a wife? Do not seek a wife. But if you marry, you have not sinned. And if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. Yet such will have trouble in life, in this life, and I am trying to spare you.
Right now, I'm going to refer back here to verse. It's such trouble in the. Where is this? The time has been shortened for now. Okay. Oh, where was that statement here? Because of the present distress time. All right, now another factor to remember. John the Apostle, as well as Paul the Apostle, have indicated to us in their statements, both of them realize they are in the tribulation that began with the stoning of Stephen. So when Paul talks about the present distress, that he is referring to the tribulation period, where sometimes it's more severe, sometimes not so severe. So this is, you got to keep that in mind as well. All right, because of the present distress, we have to be kind of flexible, I guess, what he's talking about here. But, you stay with your family. But sometimes I don't quite understand exactly what he's trying to get at. But whatever he is saying here, those who weep as if they did not weep, I'm not too sure what he's talking about there. But living in a tribulation period with persecution is not easy. And that's, I think, is what he is talking about here, because he says, because of the present distress, we have to adjust. And those who and these do not make full use of it, for the days are passing away. Okay. Now, concerning virgins, we're going to get in that category again a little bit later here. But Paul says, I give my opinion as one who is proven trustworthy. All right. Sometimes he will quote Yeshua. Sometimes he will give his own opinions based on his very close being guided by the Lord. But if you marry, you have not sinned. And if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. But I spare you, you have trouble in this life. Well, yeah, there are problems in marriage, but we just work those out. Okay. Some people have a hard time working out their marital problems. We did not, because Naomi knew what a wife should do, and I knew what a husband should do, and we blended very quickly. But some people don't have, especially if they're women's liberation people, and they want too much. It's too much problem. All right, 29 to 31, Daryl. 29 to 31.
Verse 29 to 31. But this I say, brethren, the time has been shortened, so that from now on those who have wives should be as though they had none, and those who weep as though they did not weep, and those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice, and those who buy as though they did not possess, and those who use the world as though they did not make full use of it, for the form of this world is passing away.
All right, now I do not know what he's talking about in those 3 verses, so I'm just going to pass on now. Verses 32 to 35. But some, I'll tell you, I don't get it, and I did not get that part there. So go ahead with 32 to 35, Daryl.
32 to 35. But I want you to be free from concern. One who is unmarried is concerned about the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But one who is married is concerned about the things of the world, how he may please his wife, and his interests are divided. The woman who is unmarried and the virgin is concerned about the things of the Lord, that she may be holy, both in body and spirit. But one who is married is concerned about the things of the world, how she may please her husband. This I say for your own benefit, not to put a restraint upon you, but to promote what is appropriate and to secure undistracted devotion to the Lord.
Okay, I think that's pretty well clear that if you are single and a male, a eunuch who has made himself a eunuch, single, wants to please the Lord in everything, that's fine. But of course, if you're married, you want to please your spouse. So that does not mean you're not pleasing the Lord either. We work that out. You have time with the Lord and lots of time with your spouse if you live together at home and have a home business. But if you have to go away to work from 8 till 5 or so, and then you come home, why, you spend time together to please each other, but you always have time for the Lord. And the single person, of course, has more options, more time to be serving the Lord. All right, now we're going to finish the chapters, and I'm going to give you some different readings from 36 to 40. All right, 36 to 40, Daryl.
Verse 36. But if any man thinks that he is acting unbecomingly toward his virgin daughter, if she is past her youth, and if it must be so, let him do what he wishes. He does not sin, let her marry. But if he who stands firm in his heart, being under no constraint, but has authority over his own will, and has decided that in his own heart to keep his own virgin daughter, he will do well. So then both he who gives his own virgin daughter in marriage does well, and he who does not give her in marriage will do better. A wife is bound as long as her husband lives, but if her husband is dead, she is free to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. But in my opinion, she is happier if she remains as she is, and I think that I also have the Spirit of God.
Right now, in verse 36, you notice there, behaving toward his virgin daughter. The daughter is in italics, meaning that the translator added daughter to try to explain who this virgin is. Now, I looked some other versions, and this is a New American Standard. It says daughter. Now, the Complete Jewish Bible interprets this virgin as a fiancé. In other words, the guy is engaged to this girl to be married. And then the English Standard Version had the I can't read my writing. It has another word. But anyway, so to interpret virgin here, they have several different opinions about who it is. Now, in those days, apparently, the father has pretty much control over his daughters. And you'll read that in the Bible too. He decides he gives his daughter to such and such for whatever reasons. So the girl is under the authority of her father, and that's biblical. And then once she's married, she's under the authority and protection of her husband. So a female is under the authority and the protection of her father, and then to the husband. And you notice at every marriage ceremony, the father walks his daughter down the aisle and gives her away to the gentleman that she is marrying. In the drama there, that his responsibility now is passing on to the husband to protect and care for his daughter. All right, now, that was the case back then. Now, maybe 35, 40 years ago, when we were still resident in the Philippines, there was one of our believing young ladies who wanted to marry a certain young man, but her father had decided that she should marry his friend. So she submitted to her father's will and married the father's friend. I don't know if the father's friend was a believer or not, but this is another case where the daughter obeyed the desires of her father to marry the one he had chosen for her, and she gave up her own choice. Now, whether that happens anymore today, I don't know, but this young lady stayed with her faith and continued on and is still with us today. So marriage to a potential unbeliever can turn out okay, but many times it does not turn out very good because the young lady married a guy who pretended to be a believer and turned out not to be a believer after marriage. And that's the way with a lot of young men. They want to get a clean, good girl, virgin, and so they will come around to church young peoples and all of that to pretend to be a believer and court some girl there, and she is unsuspecting and gets married, and it turns out bad. All right, so just remember, different translators understand this category of virgin. It's either a daughter or a fiance, or this other word I can't, that's an English Standard Version, but I can't read my own writing on there. Oh, betrothed, yeah. All right, the same thing as fiance. It's the virgin is betrothed or engaged to the man, and same as the complete Jewish Bible indicated, it was a fiance. They're engaged. And so they decide to get married, okay, and decide not to get married. But in those days, I guess, if you have been designated to be married to somebody, a girl that is, then it's pretty well set. Now, of course, in the time of Yeshua, we have Miriam and Joseph. And Miriam was engaged to Joseph. And in those days, what I understand, the engagement is very, very firm and strict. So it's not like being engaged today where you might just break it casually, so on. So our culture today is quite different from the culture of those days. So please, when you read these kind of things, put your mind back in the first century culture to understand what he's talking about, because you cannot come up with the right solution if you assume this is written in the 21st century for you. No, it's not. All right, now, Daryl, let's go ahead with chapter 8 and just read the whole chapter. It's only 13 verses, and then I will comment about it.
First Corinthians chapter.
One more comment about the end of this one. If a person wants to be remarried, he must marry a believer. Okay, only in the Lord. You should never marry an unbeliever. Okay, so if it's a widow or something and wants to be remarried, only in the Lord. Okay, go ahead, Daryl. Sorry, I missed that one there.
First Corinthians chapter 8, the entire chapter. Verse 1. Now, concerning things sacrificed to idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge makes arrogant, but love edifies. If anyone supposes that he knows nothing, he has not yet known as he ought to know. But if anyone loves God, he is known by him. Therefore, concerning the eating of things sacrificed to idols, we know that there is no such thing as an idol in the world, and that there is no God but one. For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is but one God, the Father, from whom are all things, and we exist for him, and one Lord, Yeshua Messiah, by whom are all things, and we exist through him. However, not all men have this knowledge, but some, being accustomed to the idol until now, eat food as if it were sacrificed to an idol, and their conscience being weak as defiled. But food will not commend us to God. We are neither the worse if we do not eat, nor the better if we do eat. But take care that this liberty of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak. For if someone sees you, who have knowledge, dining in an idol's temple, will not his conscience, if he is weak, be strengthened to eat things sacrificed to idols? For through your knowledge, he who is weak is ruined, the brother for whose sake Messiah died. And so, by sinning against the brethren and wounding their conscience when it is weak, you sin against Messiah. Therefore, if food causes my mother to stumble, I will never eat meat again, so that I will not cause my brother to stumble. Therefore, if food causes my brother to stumble, I will never eat meat again, so that I will not cause my brother to stumble.
All right. Now, referring back to verse 6. For to us there is but one God and one Lord, Yeshua. And we find this category now that they are both deity, but Yeshua is also human. So that's why God the Father is listed separately from Yeshua. The Father, and that is the hierarchy that Yeshua submitted to when he became a human to die for us. So he is the God-man, Yeshua. So one Lord, one Master, Yeshua, whom are all things, and we exist through him. Now, Yeshua is the creator of everything, but the Father is over all. And so we don't have two gods here. It's still a unity, but probably impossible to explain. But we just want to notice it, that the Father now is in a category by himself many times, and Yeshua submitted to the Father as our mediator before him. Now, the other thing I want to mention is, if someone sees you eating at a pagan temple. Now, a pagan temple was a social center in those days, and they probably had a restaurant, sort of anyway, where you could get a meal there of the meat sacrificed to the idol and other things to go along with it. Now, we may think that this does not have any application for us today. Well, sorry, it does. Now, I have never been to a Costco store because there are none around where I live. But I have read that Costco carries halal meat. What is halal meat? That is Islamic slaughtered processed meat. Anything halal, halal, H-A-L-A-L, I guess it is, halal, is Islamic product. Now, I will never knowingly eat any halal meat. Now, you might say, well, I have a weak conscience, like here. Yeah, I know the meat is not poisoned. The meat is still meat. And the meat is probably as nourishing as any other meat. But no, I will never knowingly eat or buy any halal product. Why? Because my hatred for Islam is so strong, I cannot bear to patronize them whatsoever. And I understand that halal meat, the animal is offered to Allah, the Islamic God, before it is slaughtered. So the same thing as we got in our passage here. That halal meat has been offered to Allah, who is really Satan in another name or form. Okay. Now, yes, I know the meat is not poisoned, but I will never eat it because I hate Islamic practice and everything else to do with it. So I will never, ever knowingly eat any halal meat because it's been offered to Allah, the Islamic God. Got it? That's my opinion, and that's my practice. Now, many of you are from the mountains, and whether you remember what it was like when you were born and grew up in the mountains, if you were, many mountaineers are born and raised in Baguio City. Yeah, so they've never been involved with the pagan culture. But thank the Lord that we were when we lived in Banawi, Ifugao, for most of 9 years. We were in and out for some other things, but we were there. And that was before electricity came in. That was when it was very simple. And we knew that Kanyao was every so often. Kanyao was the religion of the pagans. They would butcher a pig or they would butcher chickens or something, but mainly a pig. And that's the Kanyao. All right, now, that meat, the Kanyao meat, has been offered to the ancestor gods of the Ifugao people of that area. And I think twice somebody came by our house to give us a piece of meat. And we knew that they came from a Kanyao, from a animal that was offered to the pagan gods. And naturally, we explained, sorry, we cannot take that. We are not going to be involved in the worship of pagan gods. So we refused it, and people did not bring it to us anymore because they knew we would not take it. Now, that was essential part of our testimony and our attempt to bring the gospel message to the Benawi Ifrigal people. And I don't know how it is there today, because there are many, many believers today in Ifrigal, and there are congregations all over. I don't know about any Messianic, but there might be Messianic, but a lot of churches that has been established. Some we pioneered a few, and others did more, and they sprang up spontaneously. So all over Ifrigal province, there are Christian churches. Whether the Kanyao has much strength anymore, I do not think so. But my companion, when I lived there, George Namono, he told me that in the old days when he was very young, back in the 1930s, the power of the pagans was very strong, and the pagan priests could put curses on other people, and they were effective. But since the entrance of the gospel message, the power of the pagan religion has been brought way down so that they cannot do those kind of curses and powers, because they don't have the power anymore. It has been defeated. But anyway, it's just to illustrate that even today, in your pagan mountain culture, if it's still functioning that way, they might be offering you meat offered not to idols necessarily, although there are some idols. We have in Benawi, in Gohang, we have some idols that are the harvest gods. And the head guy that would be sacrificing and also doing the harvesting first, there would be several of these wood carvings representing the ancestor gods. And they would sacrifice an animal, and they would spread the blood over all of these wood carving idols that they had there at the granary, where they are going to store the rice when it is harvested. So I'm thankful that we had that experience of living in Benawi back when the pagan culture had some strength, and we were able to experience it then. Today, I'm not too sure, because I have not been back there and I have not followed up whether the pagan practices are very strong or very minimal nowadays. But I'm sure there are still pagans there who have not submitted to Yeshua. Okay, so that's my take on chapter 8. Not much more to say about that. And I think we have time to begin chapter 9, but we won't have time to finish it. So let's go to chapter 9, Daryl, and read verses 1 through 18. That's a lot of verses, but we can put it all in context. Okay.
First Corinthians chapter 9, verse 1. Am I not free? Am I not an apostle? Have I not seen Yeshua our Lord? Are you not my work in the Lord? If to others I am not an apostle, at least I am to you, for you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. My defense to those who examine me is this: do we not have a right to eat and drink? Do we not have a right to take along a believing wife, even as the rest of the apostles and the brothers of the Lord and Cephas? Or do only Barnabas and I not have a right to refrain from working? Who at any time serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard and does not eat the fruit of it? Or who tends a flock and does not use the milk of the flock? I am not speaking these things according to human judgment, am I? Or does not the law also say these things? For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle the ox while he is threshing. God is not concerned about oxen, is he? Or he is speaking altogether for our sake? Yes, for our sake it was written, because the plowman ought to plow in hope, and the thresher to thresh in hope of sharing the crops. If we sowed spiritual things in you, is it too much if we reap material things from you? If others share the right over you, do we not more? Nevertheless, we did not use this right, but we endure all things so that we will cause no hindrance to the gospel of Messiah. Do you not know that those who perform sacred services eat the food of the temple, and those who attend regularly to the altar have their share from the altar? So also the Lord directed those who proclaim the gospel to get their living from the gospel. Verse 15. But I have used none of these things, and I am not writing these things so that it will be done so in my case. For it would be better for me to die than have any man make my boast an empty one. For if I preach the gospel, I have nothing to boast of, for I am under compulsion. For woe is me if I do not preach the gospel. For if I do this voluntarily, I have a reward. But if against my will, I have a stewardship entrusted to me. What then is my reward? That when I preach the gospel, I may offer the gospel without charge, so as not to make full use of my right in the gospel.
All right. This is a passage that gives more or less the right for people in ministry to be paid. But as verse 15, Paul says, I have used none of these things. Okay? And he said, I'm not trying to tell you to pay me money. Now, in VBAC, as well as APMF, we put in that ministry is not a profession. Ministry is a voluntarily given to the Lord without pay. Now, I put these provisions in the constitutions and practices for both VBAC and APMF based on my observation of church practices, as well as the scripture, and as well as the practice of the rabbis in Yeshua's time. From what I have read, I understand that the rabbis were basically self-supporting. They had a profession, just like Paul had a profession of tent making. Others had professions of carpentry or something else. And they did their profession during the daytime, and they would be teaching in the evening time. And I figured that that is a good practice for us as well. Because when money is involved as a salary, it invites problems. Because the ones paying the salary try to control the one receiving the salary as to what he will teach or preach. And many Christian church pastors are paid a very good salary, but the board of elders or trustees will control him so that he's not many times free to teach what he really wants to teach. So I have observed in my earlier years, even before I became Messianic and growing up in the churches, that there are many abuses when money is involved. And I decided that when I establish churches, BBOC, and later APMF, I would establish it on a non-professional basis so that no one in ministry is paid a salary. Okay? Now, that does not mean he, excuse me, I gotta have a swig of water for my throat. Now, of course, he has to eat, he has to pay his rent, he has to take care of his family. Yes, because he has a profession where he can earn. Now, I noticed also when I was still young, during World War II, and at the beginning of World War II, many missionaries came home to the USA to avoid the war. And many of them came to my hometown of Wheaton, Illinois, where Wheaton College is a very evangelical city. And many of them were there without any profession to support themselves. Naturally, churches are not going to support missionaries who are doing nothing. Okay, they're not on the field, they're not teaching, so on. So some of them were quite pitiful, and they had to be on welfare and civil and taken care of otherwise, but they did not have a profession to support themselves, to get a job, except a very menial job that most anybody could do. So then, as a high school kid, I decided that I would have a profession regardless. If God called me to be a missionary or something, okay, I was open to it somewhat, but I would always have a profession where I could support myself if I had to stop that kind of ministry, whatever it might be, I don't know. So I prepared myself professionally to teach chemistry, and I was offered a job at Bryan College to do so that I could always support myself. Okay, so then while I was in the Army, the Lord called me to go to the Philippines. Well, you can't go to the Philippines and support yourself. They would not allow me to take a chemistry teaching job away from any Filipino chemistry teacher. No, I was not allowed to do that, although I did teach at Brent School chemistry in Baguio City for a year when they needed somebody, but I was hired as a local, not as an imported person. But anyway, that was a little bit of an exception. And the money I got went into a fund for providing the expenses of VBUC, and nothing went to me personally. All right, so non-professionalism is the best way to go. Now, it does not mean that that person might receive some gifts, but not officially, not through a budget. So the preacher or the teacher, the leader, should have a profession and support himself during the week. But if somebody appreciates his ministry and wants to give him something, he does it secretly and slip it to him, and nobody knows about it. All right, so you can always give to the Bible teacher or whatever if you feel inclined to do so, but no official salary, nothing that goes through the budget, nothing that goes through the treasury of the organization. And that's basically here what Paul is saying. Paul accepted gifts from the congregation in Philippi, and he mentions in Philippians. And now and then you'll read somewhere that some gift came from somebody here and there. Okay, that's okay. But official salaries, no. All right, now if you have volume 2, you read the chapter that has the financial policy of APMF. I have there in the first part of volume 2 several documents basic to the structure of APMF, which I believe is biblical and practical. And we stick with it, and we'll be with it. All right, now I have to quit there. So next week, Ruth, you will be taking over chapter 9 after verse 18. And I will mark this here so I don't forget. And this is partly finished. All right. Thank you, Daryl, for being reading tonight. And you're still unmarried, so you have to take attention to what you're reading tonight. Okay. So you're not a eunuch in any case. You might get married, you might not get married. But anyway, we'll see how the Lord works in your life. All right, thank you, one and all. I miss and I love you all, but I will make one comment and one suggestion. When I read your names up in the top, some of you I do not know. So I would appreciate it if you are one of those that I do not know, I would enjoy a short biographical sketch of your life and your testimony and send it to me on email at roger@walkwitz.com. I would like to know who you are and where you're coming from. And that might help me in my teaching to realize who my students are and the needs they have. Some have a good background, some do not have a good background, and they have to be taught simple things sometimes too to get along. Okay, thank you very much. And Jose, how many do we have when we're fully loaded?
Right now it's 21, Roger. I think Anne-Marie,
21,
yeah, so at least 22. We had at least
22 people. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Sir Roger.
Sameach.
Bye.
Hag Sameach Sukkot. Enjoy the week.
Hag Sameach Sukkot and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Daryl, I'm making a bet against you.
Yes, Potito.
Whoever
You're
gets
single.
whoever gets married first between you and me, gets 500 pesos. Okay.
$500, Brother Joe.
What? 500 pesos. Deal?
Into dollars.
Sir, no, it depends. For Daryl, 500. For you, $500.
$500.
Yeah.
Oh, now I got to be serious now.
Oh, contest ah.
Yep.
We'll see how it goes.
Okay. So I invite you guys to my house. It's just you and me. And I serve you meat that has a halal stamp on it. Will you eat it? It's just you and me.
Okay, brethren. Kag Sukkot Sameach.
Kag
And Shabbat
Sukkot
Shalom din po sa inyo, Kuya.
Okay. Take care.
Sige po. Blessings, blessings.
So I invite some of you to eat a meal with me. Just the two of us. And the meat,
Don't tell me it's halal.
it has a halal stamp. Will you eat the meat? It's just you and me.
If it's from personally, if it's offered from you and it's just between us, I probably would eat it.
I read chapter 8. It's very clear. An idol is nothing. Why are you afraid of the meat? If you're afraid of the meat, you're saying the idol has power. The idol has no power. Eat. I would eat, no problem.
I'll have to excuse myself also, everyone.
Okay.
I have to meet with some of the men of APMF here in Baguio for meeting for details regarding the proposed next conference here in the Philippines.
Okay.
Oh, not in Korea. I thought.
Not in Korea, unfortunately. Sige po, I'll have to quickly hit the shower.
Okay, I'm serious, Daryl. This is a real contest, okay?
Sige po, Tito. We'll see how it goes. See you all next week.
Yeah.
Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.
Aha, that's good news. I'm seeing the possibility. So I think you will win.
I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
Daryl,
Do you think you'll still get married, Kuya Joe?
Depends on her, not me.
Yes.
Tatawa kay Roger, he made a comment, said, some don't get married because nobody's interested in them. I had to laugh. I should have said, yeah, that's me, Roger. That's me.
But you're
Hi,
saying
Rico.
contest. So
Hello.
just interested.
Shabbat Shalom. Chag Sameach.
Hag Sameach siya.
Kamusta kayo?
Buti. Kamusta si Miss? What's your name, Miss?
His name's Revka. Revka.
Rivka.
Ay, kapangalan niya yung anak ni Galito.
Rivka.
Rebecca.
Kagagaling lang namin ng drumheller kanina. Sa Sukot. Kaso grabe, malamig na dito.
Malamig na pala dyan?
Malamig na.
Oo.
Hindi kami nagtagal sa labas.
Of course.
May suka din kayo, suka.
Well,
Oo.
meron din.
Oo.
Yung,
Kagabi
yung,
kami
yung
na...
suka namin, last week may pa namin pinatay, tinayo.
last week pa. Oo.
Last week pa, oo. Tapos kanina, maaga kaming pumunta doon para i-decorate sana.
Oo.
So, malamig. 5 degrees.
Oo, gano'n.